In early 2026, the world watched as a new war ignited in the Middle East. Now, this was more than just another regional flare up. It was a full blown crisis, one that threatened to throw the entire global economy into a tailspin and completely redraw the political map. So, in this explainer, we're going to break down how we got here, what exactly happened in those first critical days, and what it all really means. Let's get right into it. It all started with a flash. Imagine this. February 28th, 2026. The sky over several Iranian cities suddenly lights up with a massive wave of aerial attacks. This wasn't some minor skirmish. This was the very beginning of a major war. So, the big questions, right? How on earth did we get here? And maybe more importantly, what does any of this mean for the rest of us? Well, those are the two key questions we're going to tackle. We're going to unpack the timeline of events and then trace the shockwaves that are still rippling out from the conflict. All right, so let's start at the beginning, the opening shots of the war. What did the nations involved say they were doing? What were their publicly stated goals in those chaotic initial hours of the conflict? I mean, this was an absolutely stunning declaration. As the first strikes were hitting, the US president spoke directly to the people of Iran. He made it crystal clear that this wasn't just about hitting military targets. The goal, stated right out in the open, was nothing short of regime change. You know, these operation names, they're more than just labels. They're basically a form of psychological warfare. You have the US and Israel with names like Epic Fury and Lion's Roar, which are obviously meant to project overwhelming strength. But then you have Iran with True Promise 4, which frames their response as defensive, as just one part of a much longer struggle. It's actually a pretty fascinating look at how each side wanted the world to see them. So, how did things get to this point? While the attack itself might have seemed to come out of nowhere, the reality is that the fuse on this powder keg had been burning for months. Let's take a look at the timeline to really see the key moments that led up to this explosion. You can trace the roots of this back to 2025, with major anti-government protests spreading across Iran. That internal instability was then met with a whole lot of external pressure, specifically from the US, which moved two massive naval fleets into the region. But here's the absolute kicker. The attack was launched while diplomatic negotiations were still happening in Oman. It wasn't that diplomacy failed. The attack happened during the talks, a move that just shocked international observers. So, as you can probably guess, the two sides had completely different stories about why this happened. The US and Israel claimed their actions were a necessary preemptive strike, both to protect their own troops and to support the Iranian opposition. Iran, on the other hand, called it a clear-cut act of aggression, a deliberate move to sabotage the peace talks. Just two totally irreconcilable narratives for the same event. And from that point on, the situation just spiraled out of control with terrifying speed. We're now going to look at the immediate cost of this war, not just in military terms, but in the most tragic way possible, in human lives. Over 6,500. That's the estimated number of air attacks launched on Iran in just the first few days. It's hard to even wrap your head around that. That's an average of more than 200 strikes every single hour, a relentless, overwhelming assault. And of course, with that kind of firepower comes an absolutely devastating human cost. The Iranian Red Crescent quickly reported that at least 787 people were killed in those initial strikes alone. And that number just represents hundreds and hundreds of individual tragedies, a very stark reminder of what's really at stake here. And this conflict was not happening in a vacuum. It almost immediately started spilling over its borders. Israeli strikes in neighboring Lebanon reportedly killed at least 52 people. And that's exactly how regional wars start. A single spark that just ignites a much, much bigger fire. And then the conflict entered a new, terrifying phase. The killing of Iran's supreme leader in an airstrike triggered a massive retaliation. Over 500 missiles and drones were launched at U.S. bases and at Israel. The war just exploded across the region, leading to a ground invasion of Lebanon, deadly attacks on American troops, and even damage to a priceless World Heritage Site. In a matter of days, this had become a multi-front war with devastating consequences for everyone. But the impact of this war wasn't just felt on the battlefields. Its shockwaves hit the global economy almost instantly, and it's all because of one single, narrow stretch of water that basically acts as the world's energy lifeline. So, let's talk about the Strait of Hormuz. If you're not familiar with it, just think of it as the jugular vein for the entire global energy supply. It's this tiny little choke point, but a massive amount of the world's oil and gas flows right through it every single day. And when that flow is threatened, well, the entire global economy feels the squeeze. 1/5, 20% of all the oil and natural gas that's transported by sea passes through this one little waterway. It's an unbelievable concentration of a critical resource. And that means any disruption here has an immediate, and I mean immediate, effect on the prices you pay at the pump and for your energy bills at home. And the impact was instant. Within days, oil tanker traffic through the strait collapsed by 90%. Just stopped. Why? Well, it just became too dangerous. With the constant threat of attacks, insurance companies refused to cover the risk, and the world's most important energy highway was effectively shut down. So, of course, the markets freaked out. Oil prices shot up to their highest point in 2 years. And listen, this isn't just some abstract number on a screen. A price shock like that drives up the cost of absolutely everything, from filling your car to the food at the grocery store. It threatened to kickstart global inflation all over again. So, that brings us to the big question on everyone's mind. What happens next? Where do we go from here? Well, the future is obviously uncertain, but experts are really looking at 3 main possibilities, and they range from a quick resolution all the way to a catastrophic regional war. Let's break them down. Okay, so you have 3 basic paths forward. The best-case scenario is a short conflict. The fighting stops, shipping slowly resumes, and the economic damage is mostly contained. The middle scenario, though, is a long, grinding disruption where attacks keep happening, energy prices stay high, and the global economy slows down. And then there's the worst-case scenario, a full-blown regional war that could easily trigger a global recession and a massive geopolitical crisis. The stakes here really could not be higher. And so that's where we are now, left with this one enormous question. Can this spiral be contained? The whole world is watching, of course, hoping for de-escalation, but the forces that have been unleashed here are incredibly powerful and unpredictable. The path forward is filled with danger, and the fate of the region and the global economy really just hangs in the balance.